Hello, we're going to go ahead and get started. First and foremost, I want to thank you today for spending your time with us. We really appreciate your time. We know your time is valuable. You came here to learn a few things, and we hope to provide that to you. And we appreciate the level of engagement that we've gotten with our Funds in Focus series. We have had a lot of interest in it and a lot of views on the videos, and so I think that the community has appreciated these moments to get together and learn from our experts. So again, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming. At noon today, we had 37 people registered for the online event, and it looks like we have about 20 people in the room joining us. I want to introduce who we have with us today for our Funds in Focus on Development and Incentives. In the back of the room, we've got Emily Shockley, and she is our online moderator. She's the person who's going to be chatting with those who have joined us online, and when they'll be asking their questions, she's going to help make sure that those of us that are up here can facilitate those questions. We've got Jeff Koska and Clara Schultz, who are visual media specialists. They're the ones who are behind the camera during council meetings and planning commission meetings. They're the ones that do our broadcast. If you're unaware, the City of Loveland has an excellent television broadcast and website live stream, and that website live stream is accessible at lovegov.org/TV. We also have with us the speakers for tonight. We've got Chief Financial Officer / Deputy City Manager Brian Waldiz. We have with us in the back of the room Deputy Chief Financial Officer Molly Elder, who is smiling back there. We've got our Economic Development Director, Marcy Willard. We also have with us Bob Paulson, the Director from Development Services. And my name is Kim Overholt, and I'm our Communication and Engagement Manager. A few ground rules to start here. So actually, I'll start with the agenda. My bad. Here's what we're going to be going over today. So you're going to get a little bit of a preview. How many of you in this room have not yet attended a Funds in Focus? If this is your first Funds in Focus, can I see a show of hands? Okay, the reason that I ask is that helps us gauge how quickly we'll go through some of the budget summary information. If everybody raised their hands, we would have gone through that a little bit more quickly today, but we'll take just a little bit of time with that. So for those of you whose hands didn't go up, that might be a little bit of a repeat, but we're going to go through it pretty quickly either way. And then you'll hear more about development review, economic development, and then we'll go ahead and ask questions. Our goals today is to make sure that you guys have clear, consistent, and reliable information, that you walk away today, hopefully, with some information about, how we go about determining the development review process and what development looks like, and incentivization, the benefits of incentivization, the efforts that go into it. You're going to learn a little bit about the economic development and development services practices in each of those arenas. And before Brian takes it over with this, I want to lay some just general information. We want to make sure that everybody's voices are heard, and we want to make sure that we're using your time wisely. So as you came into the room, you got a comment card today. And that is for you to, as we are presenting, write down your questions, write down your information. That ensures that we won't have duplicative questions taking up the time today, because we do have a hard stop at 6:30. The other thing is we're going to be taking questions from the online guests as well. And there's a chance that we're going to get the same question more than once. The other part of that is, for some reason, if we don't have the facts in front of us, we want to make sure that you're getting the best information possible. So make sure that if for some reason we run out of time or we didn't have the facts in front of us, that we can read your contact information, that we've got that contact information to get back in touch with you, because your questions are important to us. If this is your first time in the Rialto, in the Devereaux room, want to make sure that you know where the restrooms are. They're just down the hall. You're going to go along the brick wall, and you'll see the restroom there. And if you have your cell phone on you, if you could please silence your phone, and that way we can just keep going without hopeful interruptions. So with that, I am going to give this over to Brian.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Thank you all for coming tonight. I am Brian Waldes, Deputy City Manager and CFO for the city. My bit will be the shortest bit tonight. I just would like to set at the highest level our budgeting background, our operating environment in the city, and that'll inform parts of the presentation that Marcy and Bob will bring to you in just a couple of minutes. So, on this first slide, we like to remind people that Loveland, for a very long time, at least 70 years, has been what we call a full-service city. And what we mean by a full-service city is that we don't just provide life and limb safety services and passable roads. We also provide a lot of the things that make Loveland Loveland. In other words, our personality, our culture, right? Things from this very building we're in right now, the Rialto, the Devereaux Room, all the way to our parks and our trails, our Chilson Rec Center, and those kinds of services are also supplied by the city. So the City of Loveland isn't just providing those kinds of basic municipal services. We also provide the services that really make the community, well, in our case, Loveland. We use this slide to show, I'm sure you've all heard that there's been some issues in the general fund, right? We've had some challenges providing the current levels of service with our new revenue levels. But we use this slide for context. And what we want to show people here is that, yes, the general fund is what we talk about a lot for the reasons I just explained, right? The general fund is the fund that provides those services I just talked about. All the great arts and culture and recreation and library opportunities that we have are provided for by our general fund. But the general fund, as we look at this pie chart, and this pie chart represents money in the bank, basically what's our relative fund balances between all our different funds, you can see that the general fund is actually a relatively small portion of what the city does. We also have a lot of business type activities. And what I mean by that is our utilities like water, power, pulse, those are very much a fee for service type model. So they are not intertwined with the general fund. So sometimes we will hear things like, hey, if the water fund is doing okay, can't the water fund maybe pay for, let's say, our fireworks? Or can the water fund restore, or can we use those funds to restore some services that have been reduced in the general fund? And the answer is no. We do things very specifically to adhere with the law, which requires that we keep these funds separated. Your enterprise or your business type funds are kept separated from your governmental type funds. So the good news is the vast majority of what we do, just based on fund balance, is doing fine. We have challenges in all our different funds, but your general fund is the one that really right now is a topic of discussion and how we're going to make that fund sustainable. But again, the rest of the city is really moving along as scheduled. Why are we having some issues in the general fund? We're just going to use a couple of slides here to show the context of our economic situation here in Loveland. What this graph shows is your sales tax rates here on the Front Range. So this is kind of our neighborhood. Those circles are to scale in terms of what the sales tax rates are in the different municipalities. The City of Loveland has not raised its sales tax rate since 1984. It's a very, very long time to keep your revenue static. Your revenue, of course, has gone up, right, based on population and economic activity, but the rate itself hasn't changed. In fact, just a couple of years ago, food for home consumption was removed from the sales tax base, and that's what that kind of little, do not enter symbol is. It shows that we are the only municipality in this region that does not tax feed for home consumption. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So when we look at this, our sales tax rate, and sales tax is the most important revenue stream by far for your general fund, you can see we have the lowest rate. Our friends in Wellington have a 3% rate as well, but they do tax food for home consumption. So even the very small town of Wellington has a functionally higher sales tax rate than the City of Loveland. Then we're going to combine that with our property tax mill levy. Same concept here. These circles are to scale. You can see Loveland is one of the lower mill rates. I believe it's Timoth and Berthoud are less than us. But after that, all the other municipalities have a higher property tax rate. And that, I believe, has been in place since 1992. So both of our primary tax rates have been static in the general fund. So something important to note about property tax. I know we all know our assessments have gone up You've seen those bills come from the county assessor. You've seen your property taxes go up, and you say, well, the city must be doing pretty well if I'm paying all this additional property tax. The fact is, the city of Loveland only gets 12.4% of your property tax. The rest of it goes to primarily the county and the school district. The school district actually has some debt issues out there, some mill levies. So this is exactly how governance works in Colorado. Counties, school districts exist primarily on property tax. Municipalities exist on sales tax. So we are very much in line with that kind of funding model. When we combine all these factors we just looked at, when we combine our sales tax rate, when we combine the fact that we don't tax food for home consumption, and we put in there our property tax rate, what we've done here is we've made kind of an example, kind of a word problem, right? We've said, what if you had a $425,000 assessed value house, you had $13,000 in retail spending, and then you had $4,600 spent in the supermarket in any given year, let's say. How much revenue would that yield for the local municipality, right? To maintain the roads and the sidewalks and the police and the fire so that we can all do all these wonderful activities? Well, Loveland comes out dead last by a lot. So in other words, with this kind of economic activity, you can see what our neighbors would be receiving in terms of revenue to sustain that activity, and you can see where Loveland is. It is not a place that's going to be sustainable for very long. We cannot continue to provide the full menu of services at that level of revenue. Furthermore, if you look, we put a little symbol in there, little flames to indicate in those districts, I should say in those municipalities, you actually pay separately for fire. So with this rate, with the City of Loveland, your fire services are included. Okay, it's kind of handled by your sales and your property tax. In Wellington, Timnath, Berthoud, Windsor, and Johnstown, there's actually an additional tax for your fire service. So that would make Loveland even lower in terms of relative revenue. And when we talk about the services provided, here's Loveland providing everything you see in those different columns up there. And certainly there's going to be little differences in what does our library look like versus another, or slight differences in your museum or your library offerings. But for the most part, we are offering very similar services at the same level as our friends and neighbors here, but we're doing it at a revenue rate that is not going to last. We're not going to be able to keep doing that. So that's what we're trying to show with this graph here. So with that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm going to pull the mic over. I hope I don't create a strange sound, but I need to look at the screen like Brian was too. So I'm Bob Paulson, the Director of Development Services for the city, and I'm going to be also talking about fees and funds, not so differently than Brian, but focusing on development-related fees. But first, I want to give you a context of development services, the department. We have a department of about 35 people, employees working in the department. Development review is a portion thereof. So on the screen, you can see there's, we're going to start from the left of that screen, looking at community and strategic planning, which is the policy setting division of our organization for development services. So they're actively involved in working on things like the comprehensive plan, corridor plans, other plans which kind of have a larger format. That includes Historic Preservation Commission as well. And also, more currently, our staff in strategic planning is working on implementing a lot of the state legislation that has come down from the state legislature in the last few years. If you know Carrie Burchett, she's been busy working on housing-related matters. Then moving rightward on the slide is community partnership. That group with Allison Haid heading that up recently got moved into development services. We're real happy about that. In addition to the human services format that Allison works on, she also works on affordable housing, and that really bolsters our approach to providing diverse housing and affordable housing in Loveland, so we're very excited about it. Next is current planning, and that's where I'm going to spend a good deal of my time this evening. Relatively brief, but I want to give you an understanding of how current planning works and how the development review process functions within the city. Next is the building division. The building division, I think people probably understand that, but the building division is distinct from development review or current planning in that the building division really looks at structure, structural integrity, structural function. They are not really looking a lot outside of the walls of the building. They're working to ensure that building codes, which tend to be shared by a lot of communities, are met in the building construction process. Development review, on the other hand, is really looking at sites, a lot of engineering, a lot of utility extensions, that type of thing, and how sites function individually in the community. And then working the way to the far right is code administration. So what we have here is kind of a sequence of dealing with land development and construction. And the code administration office works on the maintenance of the community. So there's standards, codified standards that exist in Loveland as they do in many other communities. Ours are tailored, as a lot of our planning and zoning laws are as well, but they're tailored to the community and they set the bar for what minimum standards the community maintenance needs to be, whether that's weed, litter, refuse, the conditions of buildings, and so forth. And our code officers work to essentially monitor that and work with the municipal court to enforce it when that is necessary. So development review, and that's the city's current planning office manages development review. So that includes all these offices that are listed here in this circle, which consists of the development review team. And that's about 15 individual people from these various departments. We meet every Wednesday morning to review applications. So that group, if you look at it carefully, you'll see that, well, how does this work? Well, there's a lot of engineering work that is in addition to planning related work. So a lot of the work that they do are looking at underground improvements, stormwater, roadways, and so forth that go into the review of development applications. We also have partners like Thompson School District. They get involved in the process, particularly when there's a housing project. We have also involvement with private utility providers like Excel in some areas of town, as well as private water and sewer districts in the northeasterly part of town. Just to let you know, and this is what the third bullet says, is proposals. Typically an application comes in, it's all electronic, so we're looking at it on computers, not on pages of paper anymore. But those applications may contain anywhere from 5 to 100 pages of materials that have to be reviewed by the development review team. So it can be a fairly detailed and extensive process. They usually go through 3 rounds of review. Each round, there's no telling how it may take us on average 3 weeks to do a single review by our staff. The applicant may take weeks or just a few weeks to get that material back to us for a re-review. But again, there's usually 3 iterations of that review process before it's finalized. Excuse me. So, with that, applicants, in many cases a developer or a small project, could be a home owner or a small business, they're the ones that provide the designs for us. We're not designing projects for them. They submit designs that we review. And in this case, they're also providing, in many cases, traffic studies, environmental studies. They may have to provide studies of water and wastewater, electrical engineering studies, depending on the size and location of a project site. So I guess what I want to say to you is it's a complex process. A big project, a complex project is going to take a lot of review, not just from what you see above ground, but what you don't see below ground, or that you see in terms of the grading and trenching that goes into the development of a site. One thing that's important to note, and this is on the bottom bullet of the page, is most projects in Loveland, most development projects go through review administratively. So from time to time, you will see the yellow signs on a development site indicating that there's a development review in process. That is likely to be an annexation, a zoning, or rezoning. There's a few other types of projects that go through a public review, but most projects, I'd say well over 90%, go through this administrative process because zoning is already established. They must comply with the zoning standards. They must comply with the engineering standards of the city. So we're taking this process review-wise administratively to bring out about project approval. So the development review team, and I went into, and you saw the circle illustration of all the divisions that participate. We work closely with applicants. Our job is, as I see it and how we've worked over the 20 years that I've been here, is to work with applicants to help them get through the process. We are not designing their projects for them. We are reviewing their designs, but invariably questions come up. And we want to help them proceed in the process. We want to get through that process. We're not cutting corners, but we are trying to help to guide them, when the case may be, to get through the process. So we're a problem-solving organization as well as having a regulatory function. The process, as I mentioned earlier, is really, much of it relates to engineering design, and that's why we have such folks in transportation, water, wastewater, electrical design, all working on projects that include a heavy percentage of engineering and the detailed drawings that come with that. A thing that I'd like to note is that individual developments must fit into the larger system that I've been talking about, that engineering system, whether it's water, wastewater, electrical, roadway. They must fit in so that an individual project, yes, they need utilities and so forth, but that has to be right sized for the individual project. So that's in some sense why the engineering review and the review that we conduct is lengthy. To give you some sense, we may review 100 and some projects annually in the development review side, while thousands of projects are reviewed at the building side, right? Individual homes, that type of thing, or individual buildings, or someone's water heater, their deck, their basement finish, all go through the building office. In development review, we are looking for buildings and their compliance and the site's compliance with the zoning code and these engineering standards. Annexation and rezonings and zonings, like I mentioned, you can see on the kind of circular component here on the right side of the screen. Annexation and rezonings, they do go through, they're mandated by state law. They must go through a public hearing process, typically a neighborhood meeting, and then on to the planning commission, and then for a recommendation, and most cases onto the city council for a final determination. But again, that's still a small percentage of projects that need zoning approvals before they can come to fruition. This is one of the last, wonder if, I knew it, I thought I missed one. So paying for growth. This is something I hope you can understand, and I've been talking about, developers paying for designs, they pay for extension of utilities, they pay for roadway improvements, oftentimes intersection improvements, they pay fees, and so on. I'm not trying to justify everything they do, but they have a lot of costs associated with development. And so they pay for the design of these plans, the engineering plans, the building plans, and so forth, and the infrastructure that needs to be brought to the site. They also, in the case of water, wastewater, they're paying for system impact fees, meaning they make a contribution that's proportionate to our water and wastewater systems. The systems that involve, our water, wastewater plant, our water provisions and water resources, and also a big fee a big cost. It's not really a fee, but they need to bring water to the site, meaning paying for raw water to ensure that that project has water to utilize that's dedicated to that project, not just currently, but in the long run. So that's therefore they're essentially paying for the reservoir system, making a contribution to the system that is reserving water for the city of Loveland. One thing to note is our water rates, raw water rates, are probably lower than most communities in the vicinity, and we've been real successful in securing water rights for the long term in this community. Again, new development needs to provide connections to the system. They need to help pay for the systems they operate within, and help be able to give new development, which may be down the road or nearby or adjacent, the opportunity to connect to the systems that are being provided for the development at hand. So it is a complex process. It is one that we really honor and take care of very carefully with a lot of detailed review, and take the codes and standards that our city has established very seriously to ensure that the community is safe, that it meets standards, that it's vibrant, and has opportunities, whether it be for restaurants, jobs, business of various sorts, and it provides sustainable dollars for the community. I'm going to use an example, and some of you may know of Lee Farm on the west side of Wilson Avenue. This is a photo from that property. It's a subdivision, so a large residential subdivision. So for that subdivision, just as way of example, the developer must extend roads to that site, extend roads at their cost, their design cost, and kind of an approval or an improval for those roads and utilities. And then they also must pay for all the systems that are within that project. So the roadways, the water, the sewer, everything that you see there, they're the ones that have designed that and met our city standards and are inspected by the city and make for a vibrant community. So, and there's sometimes off-site improvements that need to be complied with as well. For example, maybe a traffic signal that's located off-site that is warranted by the city due to the increased traffic from a property, or maybe a roundabout or something like that, that also might be a few blocks or a little ways away from a development, but they're having such a significant impact with the growing traffic that they have to make sure that traffic is allowed to proceed under city standards and work safely and efficiently. Oh, long way. Sorry. I'm going. The next is capital expansion fees, and this is a little bit different. And, I think you need to understand, and there's a list of essentially the buckets that are available for capital expansion fees. And depending on the project at hand, contributions are made, and most projects pay for some level of capital expansion fees. For example, if there's a high transportation component, even a drive-through coffee shop, there's going to be significant capital expansion fees for that applicant to pay for. And that money goes into a fund that is used exclusively, not the general fund like most fees go into, but a fund that it pays for growth over time. And I'll explain this a little bit more as we go along. But by law, those funds can't be mixed. They can't be put into the general fund. I think Brian was talking a little bit about, how these funds are separate, but especially with capital expansion fees, what they pay for, what developers contribute, and what they pay for is growth related. And they can only be used for equipment or other improvements. They can't pay for new city staff. They can't pay for maintenance. They are paying for growth-related impacts on the community. So when you hear of CEFs or hear of impact fees, that's what many communities call them, those fees are very separate and they pay for growth very specifically. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you have going back to that Lee Farm example, all those houses. Well, that addition of all the people that live there in those houses, there's a way of kind of proportionately figuring this out. It's not random. They're going to have an impact on fire service. They're going to have an impact on our parks, probably an impact on our library. Well, what that applicant will pay for is a proportionate share to ensure that growth can occur in those arenas down the road. But they can only be spent on, like I said, facilities, tangible facilities, not maintenance, not personnel. I hope that makes sense, but that's kind of a consideration for not only do applicants or developers pay through fees and design and extension of utilities in this process, they are also paying essentially forward to these pots of money that are designed to pay for increased growth in the community. And it may not have anything to do, have a nexus between where that property is. For example, let's just use the example of McDonald's on Highway 34, a relatively new development on East Eisenhower. That generates a lot of traffic. Well, that money on the CEF for transportation will go into the CEF for transportation, that pot of money, and that money might be spent in Northwest Loveland on some project. So it's not tied to the individual kind of development that is occurring. It's a pot of money that can use across the community that's growth related as prioritized by the city. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there's questions about this after we get done with our presentation. So, how do growth and development benefit the community? And I've talked about this, but I just want to go through. It ensures using good quality standards and rigorous engineering and rigorous review by the city and a real commitment by the development community to ensure that the city remains safe, functional, and growth can continue to occur. It's facilitating economic opportunity in many ways, perhaps indirectly in some cases, new jobs, new housing opportunities, new revenues. The funds that come through increased expenditure in the community, whether they be sales tax or something related like that, much of that does goes back to the city. Property taxes, as Brian explained, we get a proportionate share. But growth does provide those new amenities, new services, in many ways, new jobs. And then, as I mentioned, with many of the fees, many of the expenditures made by the development community, and with capital expansion fees, these monies are reinvested in the community. So I hope, I'm sorry, I'm just having, I'm going to leave this at this point, but I hope you have questions. Happy to answer them. This is a complex system. It involves a lot of different people working together to ensure that the city continues to be vibrant, the city uses money wisely, and development pays its own way. So with that, I'll turn this over to Marcy Willard.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I always appreciate the opportunity to engage with the community, talk about what economic development is, the value that we bring to the community. I'm part of a small and mighty team doing this work. We are really passionate about the work we do, and we're passionate about serving our community. So I'll get right into the what, why, and how of economic development. In its simplest form, economic development is bringing new wealth to a community. And I put that in air quotes because wealth can be direct revenue, direct dollars, but it can also be new jobs. It can be private investment. It could be infrastructure. It could be new amenities. So economic development is bringing that new wealth into the community. And so our department contributes by bringing that new wealth and contributes to economic vitality. Economic vitality is the second highest priority in the City of Loveland's strategic plan. And it's a reflection of the well-being within a community. And there's three main facets to well-being. First is resilience. That's the ability of a community to adapt to changing conditions and to dynamic conditions. It's also financial health, so that economic piece, that direct dollars piece. It's also quality of life, that placemaking element. And so these three facets make up the well-being within a community. And it's important to always be bringing that new wealth, the new energy, the new resources into a community in a purposeful way in order to support a robust economy and a thriving community. Economic development, we work with short-term goals, projects, and growth in mind, as well as long-term. Short-term, every single day, we're working with businesses, developers, builders, organizations to provide the tools and resources they need today. Do we need to buy some equipment? Do we need to grow in a space? Do we have questions? So that's our near-term, our short-term work. But it's very important that we're also looking into the long term as well. So for instance, we've got an outstanding new project at the airport around aerospace and aviation. We're starting that now. That will roll out for the next 5 to 10 years. We're also working with a large office project that will be bringing hundreds of jobs to the community over the next 10 years. So certainly when they open their new facility, there will be jobs at that time. But if you're in high school today or in college today, there will be primary job opportunities for you available in the future in Loveland, in your community. I would never take credit for bringing these jobs or making that investment. What we do is we're facilitators, supporting these processes and projects, again, to contribute to that robust economy and a vital, thriving community. We have two divisions in economic development in the City of Loveland. The first is what we call business development. That is funded solely by the general fund. And then we have Visit Loveland, which is our destination marketing organization that's funded solely by lodging tax. So I'll start up at the top with business development, talk about that value, the how we're doing it, the why we're doing it. Really in business development, we're looking at the resilience and the economic health. Resilience, again, how can you adapt to changing conditions? So let's go back to COVID. If your sole focus for your community is around one or two industries, let's say tourism, and COVID hits and you have no tourism, you are devastated. And your ability to bounce back takes a lot longer than if you work through diversification. And so that's what we do in economic development. We work with manufacturing, healthcare, construction, logistics, food tech, ag tech, hospitality. We really focus on bringing a breadth of industries so that we're not just dependent on one or two industries. We also, again, focus on economic health. So that's bringing new revenue, new jobs, private investment, infrastructure into the community as well. We have several different focus areas with our team members. We have one person that just works on attraction. That's bringing new jobs and new companies to the area. I'm really excited to say we'll have an announcement coming out tomorrow in a press release, bringing dozens of new jobs and millions of dollars in new investment. And so I can't speak further, but we have won this attraction project that we've been working on for about 6 months. So very excited with that. We do business retention and expansion. That's working with our existing businesses that are already here. We want to keep them. We want to help them stay here, and we want to help them grow here. We're working with a small company right now, getting some tax credits at the state to help financially, workforce credits so they can add new people, and some subsidized skills training so they can stay here and continue to contribute here. We have our small business services. This is for our micro businesses, our entrepreneurs, very small numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. We help them start here and we support them to stay here. So kind of our entrepreneurial community. And then lastly, we focus on development, redevelopment, and retail. And we help facilitate these projects. So for instance, Amazon's coming to Loveland. We did not provide an incentive. However, through building that building, it has brought in over $19 million in new revenue, in new fees through the process that Bob talked about this evening. We also have Bass Pro. We anticipate that'll open up this summer, bringing hundreds of thousands of dollars of new sales tax. into the community as well. So those are some examples of the projects that we facilitate that bring the new revenue. On the Visit Loveland side, this is solely supported by lodging tax. That's 3% that's added to every hotel night in Loveland. And the hotel nights are significant. A lot of times we talk about just the lodging tax. Every hotel room also pays the 3% sales tax. So when someone gets a room here, they've got sales tax, which goes into the general fund as new revenue. They've got lodging tax, which helps us continue to do the work we do, but we have our ancillary visitor spending. When people come here and stay here, they eat here, they shop here, they support our services. And so that's how Visit Loveland brings value into the community. Our two focus areas there are quality of life and economic health. So again, I just talked about the numbers. We have a team of folks that do digital engagement and social media. We do sponsorships of local events and work with our partner organizations. A lot of work around marketing, not only about the work we're doing in the community in general, but the specific events. We've just added this amazing new calendar on our site, for instance, that covers every single event that you could attend as a community member or as a visitor, bringing out all of that together. And then we do group sales and conferences. So two examples that I want to bring up, we're talking here, quality of life. We sponsored the Sweetheart Festival in downtown over Valentine's Day. We had 20,000 people in downtown. We had record numbers at the museum, record numbers at our stores and our restaurants, and it brought the community together. It was a way to engage for our community and our residents and the region. We've also been able to attract a square dancing convention that's coming in 2027. It will yield 3,900 hotel nights. We cannot accommodate all of those in Loveland, but every single room in in Loveland will be filled. And again, that's sales tax, lodging tax, and visitor spending. So two good examples there. Okay, on to quality of life. I want to go a little bit more into community development before we move into our investment and why this is so important. And we know that workforce is changing. So for instance, my family moved here to Loveland for my dad to take a job at Hewlett Packard. A recent statistic that I read that's national, but across the country, 40% of our job seekers right now are choosing the community or the region first, and then they're looking for a job. So that community, that sense of place is very, very important. We also know any given year that 20 to 25% of our workers in Northern Colorado are 100% remote, so they can work anywhere. So again, that community development is so important, establishing that sense of place, creating a place where people want to live, work, and play. And that's not just attracting our workers and our families, but it's supporting our existing folks to stay here and engage and enjoy. So again, community development is more important now than it ever has been. I'll now go in and talk about the numbers from 2025. This is a few of the data points that we collect. Certainly we have more. I don't need to read every slide. Up at the top, that's our work around attraction. We have 4 active projects, so 4 companies that are currently still looking to operate in Loveland, to locate here. Those are active. And again, the one that we have one. And again, I'm super excited about that announcement to come out tomorrow. Over 300 company engagements, and I don't use that number loosely. It's not just like somebody picked up the phone and called us. That's providing a tool and a resource direct, could be multiple calls, multiple meetings, just some level of connectivity, but a true outstanding engagement with these companies. Our small businesses, our micro businesses and entrepreneurs there. Our grocery developments, you know, are coming in with King Soopers, Whole Foods, Bass Pro. And then the bottom is our lodging tax numbers for folks who don't follow this. 1.4 million in the lodging tax, 2.8 million visitors. The visitor spending, again, that ancillary spending, and the associated sales tax. We'll move into the investment overview. I know there's a lot of interest within the community around that. We take it very seriously. I take it very seriously. I live in this community. So it's really important that our team act responsibly in a purposeful way with the work and be accountable for the work we do in this area. Real quick, these are some of the ways that we provide assistance. The first is the sales tax rebate. For instance, Jack's West, they sell an item, they charge the sales tax, they pay the sales tax, then we rebate a small portion back to that company. The development waivers, so the fees that Bob talked about this evening that are assessed, those can be waived. So we're not losing money out of the general fund, but we're not gaining money. It's net neutral. Small business cash incentives up to $30,000. We can rebate the business personal property taxes just like we do with sales tax. And on occasion, some of our clients, for instance, Bass Pro, ask for a guaranteed development review time that Bob's team did an incredible job in bringing Bass Pro here. So on to the numbers. I do want to start at the upper right of this slide, which talks a little bit about how we do this process and what we look for. It's far more thorough than this, but for the case of this evening, I highlighted a few points. Number one, it needs to have a public purpose, fill a financial gap, or influence a location decision. The city manager has the ability to approve $30,000 or less. Anything over that goes to council for approval or denial. And they all have a performance requirement within that contract that I tell you we hold to. So the numbers during this period of time, and this is only for the sales tax that we monitor, so that's Jack's West, the brands, and a few other small deals. We do not monitor the larger MFAs. Collected $3.4 million in this time frame. Of that, we shared back over $800,000, just about $886 you can see there. The new revenue into the general fund was $2.5 million. In absence of sharing the $886,000, there is no $2.5 million. But for the incentive, there is not the $2.5 million. So that is new revenue into the city that we would not do without this partnership. And it's an outstanding return, as you can see there, of 285%. Into our business assistance agreements, we've done 40 in this period of time, 23 for retention. So that's keeping our existing companies here and supporting their growth. We don't want to lose those jobs. 12 in attraction, and then 5 projects have been canceled. We can't control development. We can't control private investment. So in 5 cases, we came up with an agreement that did not take place. No money went out. No money came in. We hear a lot in the community that we just support big business. This slide to me is an outstanding reflection and demonstrates how much we work with small business. In the state of Colorado, under 50 employees is small business, over 50 employees is large business. You can see here 24 of our agreements were for our small businesses and 60 were for our larger. So we value our small business and we work hard to support them. Lastly, outside of that direct revenue, those jobs, that private investment, that revenue, tax revenue, there's indirect benefits. And I'm really quickly going to talk through this because this is great value to the community as well. Reusable interior space. If we support a small business in building a wall in their space, building a lab space, helping with a break room or a conference room, that investment stays in the building. So when that company grows and expands out of that space, that investment stays in that space for another company to come along and use that space. And we have seen that happen out at the Forge. Incentives may serve as matching funds. We had a small aerospace company in Loveland that we helped with a $30,000 incentive. They were also at the same time applying for a federal grant. The federal grant for R&D required matching funds. They were able to demonstrate the city's incentive as matching funds to make more money towards that research and development project. Placemaking. We supported an incentive at Desk Chair right across the street. Not only kept that amazing historic building in downtown, but we have dozens of entrepreneurs and workers coming in and out of that building all day long, supporting downtown, our retail, our restaurants, making a really thriving dynamic workspace. It's also an outstanding public-private meeting space, and they work really well with the public. So again, an example of placemaking. New infrastructure, Sprouts is a great example of this. We needed better intersection to accommodate for that. We needed improved accessibility and improved safety. They were required to put in that turn lane and make those improvements to make that a better corner as part of their development project. And lastly, every new job created supports other jobs in the community. So if we bring in 50 new jobs, they're spending here. They're coming to the restaurants, spending at the shops, investing here. If they live here, there are new customers for our school districts, for our healthcare systems, for all of that. So those new jobs have what we call a multiplier effect within the community. So with that, I will close. A lot of information quickly, but we look forward to engaging with you with questions.
So with that, we're going to move on to our questions and answers portion of this. We are going to stay a little bit later because we certainly wanted to make sure that we had time allocated to questions and answers. However, we do have to pack up and get out of here, so it's not a ton over, but we lost about 5 minutes with the time that we took, so we will be able to stay until 6:40. We have to pack up all the equipment and stuff, so I appreciate your understanding. Our intent, though, is to get to all the questions. And with that, we have given you guys a comment card when you came in. Is there anybody who needs one now that is in person that could write their questions down? I'll get you one. Anybody else who needs one so that they can write down their questions? And I'm also going to ask that you legibly write your contact information. That way, if for some reason we haven't gotten your question, we have a way to get in touch with you. If you're joining us online, this is just your reminder to please go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. We have our moderator who will be sending them to us so that we can also answer those questions for you. So let's take a moment. Let's finish our questions up, and then we'll get started with our first questions. And it's great to see so many questions. We really appreciate that. So I'm going to go with our first online question. So I am not sure who would take this question, but it asks, regarding the CEF and development portion, how are metro tax districts tied to our city's financial picture? One item of note is this wasn't going to be necessarily focused on metro districts. So I want to make sure that, we stick to the topic of development and incentives and the process in place for that. Were there any thoughts from our panel?
Just very quickly, I can address that. What's a metro district? A metro district is basically a quasi-governmental entity that has the right to levy property tax. All right, so what does that mean in English? Basically means that there's going to be a development and the developer wants to create a metro district. That metro district can then levy a property tax just on that particular development, and the revenue from that property tax can only be used for the public improvement components of that project, meaning roads, sidewalks, the utilities, and things of that nature. So metro districts are very prevalent. I shouldn't say very prevalent, but are prevalent in Loveland, a little more so than our neighboring cities. They do pay all their fees. They pay it's the CES just like any other development. So, and how they fit into our larger financial picture, the city doesn't see any of those revenues, so it doesn't have a direct impact on the city's remuneration.
Okay. Now this is an in-person question. What percentage of the budget is the CEF and lodging tax? That's a bit of trivia right there.
It's a deep hole. The CEFs are not, in our general fund, we have about $120 million in revenue. It would be hard for me to, off the top of my head, what every CEF bucket combined yields each year. But it's definitely a much smaller amount than that. Than the second part of the revenue selection one is
lodging tax.
Lodging tax, about $1 million a year. About $1.4 million a year. Now, when we looked at our funds before, when we first did that kind of introduction, the lodging tax fund is separate from the general fund. So it very much exists. It's what we call a special revenue fund. It's a little different than an enterprise fund. But those marketing funds must go into that fund and then must be used for the purposes of marketing the city.
Okay, this is a personnel question, and it's an in-person question. Were the use of CEF's capital expansion funds at the heart of the ousting of the fire chief? Well, and so the thing about that question is, one, we couldn't discuss personnel matters with the public per se, but it's unrelated. Is that correct? Thank you. I want to make sure that that it's clear that it's unrelated, completely unrelated. So this one, I want to make sure that I'm giving people turns. I didn't realize I got questions, multiple pages of questions from the same person. So if you see me shuffle the paper, it's the same person. In calculating the overall taxes Loveland citizens pay, could you add the average cost of Metro District taxes so citizens can more accurately judge the overall tax burden of Loveland citizens compared to our neighbors? In calculating the overall taxes Loveland citizens pay, can you add the average cost of Metro District taxes so citizens can more accurately judge the overall tax burden of Loveland citizens compared to our neighbors? What I think this is asking is, can the city absorb Metro taxes to provide services, maybe? Let me hand this question over to.
As Kim had said earlier, this is not a Metro District session. I understand the question. In other words, maybe could you say, okay, here's what the average person pays in metros. The challenge with that is you either pay Metro District taxes or you don't. You either live in a Metro District or you live outside of one, so it doesn't affect you. So to average it wouldn't really tell you much. But I understand the question, and I think we'll have future talks on Metro Districts with the community in the future.
Okay. Why 25 years in large financial incentives? Can they be more or less?
So every incentive that we develop is individual, unique, and customized to what that project needs, what the business needs, what the development needs. And so we don't have a standard time limit. We, again, judge that based on the needs of the project. In many cases, the large projects where there are tens of millions of dollars worth of investment, let's say in infrastructure, those costs get financed over time. And so sometimes in the case of our incentives, the incentives go for a period of 25 years because that may be the financing term, and our support may contribute to how that project is being financed. But they're all individual and custom, and I haven't been involved in an incentive that's been over 25 years. I can't speak to prior to my tenure.
Okay. I'm going to do an online question next, and this is a reminder to our online participants to go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. Do large businesses such as Amazon that bring in large tax revenue give the city breathing room in a tight budget space?
Well, I'll start in that I just spoke with our building official prior to this presentation, and it's over 19 million right now in those fees. I remember when Brian was talking through our whole budget process that very original 12 million, I think it was, in fees really helped with the budget at the time and did give us some breathing room. Of course, these are one-time fees. And so once they're up and running, we'll have property taxes, we'll have the value from those new jobs. So certainly when that money comes in, it provides some extra income, but it doesn't provide it on a regular basis to where you can budget around it.
If I can just speak quickly, that project in particular. That's a great project for our community, but it does not yield the city any sales tax. So that's a processing facility. So I know it kind of looks like giant building. We get the sales tax on everything that goes through it. I wish we did, but you pay your sales tax at the point of delivery, not the process and flex.
Thank you for clearing up that misconception, because I do believe that it's something that some folks were unaware of. So, how does the general fund shortfall and run to failure affect development decisions? So, I think that this person must have attended our Parks and Rec and Public Works Funds in Focus events. How does the general fund shortfall and run to failure affect development decisions? And so Marcy and Bob weren't here for those. So, and neither were several people in our audience. So, can I summarize kind of what we talked about during those sessions? Essentially, what it was is with our budget, we have kind of been borrowing from our future, to use a term that Brian has used, because we've been trying to maintain the service level that we do. We have a theater, and other communities don't have theaters. We have museums, and other communities might not have museums. We have our library services that come out of our budget. And in other areas, it might be a special district that you see on your property tax bill. So we are doing our best to fund everything. But with that, what happens is there are other areas that are existing right now that aren't necessarily being maintained. And so without that maintenance, what happens is it's kind of like the roof of your house, or appliances in your home. You do regular, or your car is a great example. You do regular maintenance on it, keeps it running, it keeps it going for a long time, and it keeps the amount that you put into it lessened because you've put in that annual maintenance. And what has happened with our budget in some of our areas, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, because hopefully I am understanding this correctly, we're not able to put in the maintenance that we need to put in. And that's putting us into this concept of maybe run to failure. Is that correct? And how does that affect development decisions? Can it affect development decisions?
I would say that does, from a development review perspective, and Marcy may have a different take on this, but from a development review perspective, we're not soliciting development, and our fees, our initiatives with the review process are not tied to, the city's need. We're aware of that, but we don't adjust our fees. We don't adjust our practices based on budgetary considerations. Those fees that we have are aligned to provide, pay for the cost of services and for the cost of growth, as I explained in my presentation.
And we have gotten a lot of questions, and we really appreciate that. A lot of these sheets have 3, 4, 5 questions. And so I just want to prepare our hearts for, moving on as quickly as we can and hopefully getting back to folks whose contact information. So next time, multiple choice is what we'll ask for. Okay. An online question. Do we know the percentage of new jobs created that are in construction? What percentage of those jobs go to people living in Loveland, and what percentage of those people live in affordable housing?
So as we know with construction, it's temporary for the most part. It comes and it goes. And so those jobs can be harder to count. There's always set numbers within construction companies, but then they're always hiring subcontractors as well. So we do have an outstanding construction partnership within Northern Colorado who tracks a lot of information. If we have this person's information, I can talk through, send a little bit more information on the construction industry that could provide jobs. I don't know if they carry demographics, and of course we wouldn't know the housing situation, unfortunately.
Once a development has been approved, how long can the approval last without action being taken on the land? Like breaking the ground.
Once a development application has been fully approved, there's no time frame. So we have time frames for our applications going through the system, and if they pause, and it's generally a 3-year period, 2-year period, they have to start over or pay additional fees to get back into the system. But once there's an approval, and some of you may know about the Trimble Hills apartment project, that zoning was approved nearly 30 years ago for this project apartment on Cascade. And it was a surprise to the community that that project started up after all this time, but their approval was received and they had those entitlements to build essentially the apartment project that they are now going through the review process on. They have property rights. We honored those. And so that's an exceptional situation. One thing I want to add, and this doesn't answer the question, this kind of goes beyond that, but we understand from our department's perspective, and we're working with Public Works to try and improve our communication with neighboring citizens in cases like that, or in cases that has much a shorter lag between development approval and actual construction, to make sure that the community is informed. We don't have a process by code that you can necessarily have a lot of impact on that project. We'll take questions, we'll take ideas, but we don't have a process that goes through a public hearing after that period of time if the zoning hasn't been approved long ago. So again, we're working on that to inform the community of being as transparent as we can, and you'll see changes coming out over the next several months in terms of our communication process.
And thank you to the online person that's reminding us to speak into our mics. We'll make sure that we're doing that. Thank you for that reminder. This next question, how will the community know if a data center makes an application puts an application in for development review, submits an application?
I'm sorry, Kim, the data center?
How will the community know if a data center puts in an application?
So typically our process includes a concept review meeting. It's a pre-application meeting. That information is not publicized. So, there's been questions about that, but we try to keep that information private. If requested, we'll provide city comments, but not reveal any detailed information because applicants are in competition in many cases, and that's not a formal application. But once an application is made, we post information on the city's current development activities mapping system. I think information is available at the desk out front about that tonight. One thing I would really advise folks to do is take a look at that interactive mapping system. You can find out about new applications and so forth. If a project like a data center must go through a public hearing, as that project is entered into the system and perhaps after a first or second review is complete and we feel confident as to how that project is likely to develop, and we have a neighborhood meeting and then answer questions, and the applicant answers those questions predominantly, and then it goes on to public hearings at the Planning Commission and City Council. But it just depends on where it is, what the zoning is, and whether there is a required by code public hearing process. So I hope that answers your question.
So we've got 2 minutes to do this, and a lot of questions that have gone unanswered, and so we're going to do our best to respond to the question, maybe put them online. This next question, how does our capital expansion fees compare to other communities? Is that something that we know?
We do benchmark with other communities. We did a study about 3 years ago on the CEFs, and we're in line. I would say we're middle of the pack. Well, off the top of my head, I can't say specifically where we rank, but we are not an outlier in the CEF world.
What are economic development and planning goals for vacant and dilapidated business buildings? Is there a plan for dilapidated business buildings?
It's certainly one of the tasks that we do is to keep an inventory. and to do our best to identify the owners, what the situation may be around the building or the land itself, and how we might work with them with that space. We have access to a variety of tax credits from the state we could use to support that. And for instance, with the Albertsons building, we were in contact with that owner over and over and over and over and over, trying to improve that situation. Unfortunately, they weren't motivated, but we do identify these black box spaces, these more dilapidated areas, and we work to try and find a good fit for that space to the best of our ability.
Last question for this event, because we've got questions we're going to have to look at on the side. I am concerned about the bond that the city is paying for the parking garage. How much money has the city paid to the project that the current tenants are not paying? So, concerned about the bond that the city is paying for the parking garage. How much money has the city paid to this project that the current tenants aren't paying?
Sure. Well, that's a question about a project right here downtown called the Foundry Metro District. We partnered with that development to build the Foundry Metro Garage, and without getting too much into the details, basically we calculate the incremental property tax revenue from that project, and that was intended to, when the project was started, was intended to match or exceed the amount of debt service for the garage. We have not found that the revenue from the project is equaling to what we're doing for the debt service for the garage. It's on a bond, the certificate of participation, but the city is falling short in the six figures, but we're falling short between $300,000 and $400,000 a year in terms of what we're calculating as incremental revenue from the project versus what we are paying on the garage. So it's not the best result, but we are working to resolve that with developer. I mean, it's another way.
Okay, and with that, we were able to take the list of questions and answer everybody who had submitted those, at least one off of everybody's list, I hope. At least that's what it seemed to be. And so we've got the rest of your questions. If you have more questions, go ahead and bring those up. And for those of you online, we're going to keep the chat open for another minute for you to drop any remaining questions. But that concludes our event tonight, and we really appreciate that you came. Please make sure if you still have the outstanding questions that you turn them in. We probably can have you in the space for about 5 minutes while we're cleaning up, but I apologize for our busyness while we're doing that. So thank you so much for coming. We appreciate your attendance at this event. Tune in to letstalkloveland.org/budget for future updates and information. Thank you.